Yes, it is Friday, Chris.
It's Friday.
Friday before
Uh,
the tax deadline, so even better.
that
Well, it depends
that's
on how you're looking at it,
right.
actually.
I was about to say, yeah. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
it's good. It's good when it's resolved. It's bad if you send your stuff to your tax preparer like on Wednesday or something. That's probably not great.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
just
Shame
just
on
20
you.
minutes ago, I had to let a client know that hey, I need to look a little deeper, so we're gonna have to extend you.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah. That'll happen.
yeah.
That'll happen. Welcome everyone to On the Rocks, the e-commerce hour, or the e-commerce hour by On the Rocks, or whatever we want to call this show. I'm Chris. He is Jay. Yeah, all right, good, got it. And we are the hosts of your show. Today, last week we talked about the hidden costs of not capturing your costs, and lo and behold, we now have like tariffs on wine, we have tariffs on this, we have tariffs on that, we have tariffs on the other thing, and we're starting to have conversations with our clients related to tariffs as well. Which means it's a really, really good time to double down on talking about this and go a little bit deeper. And so this episode is going to educate e-commerce sellers on how to properly source products or consider their sourcing, calculate their true landed costs, and price for a profitable gross margin. So all of the outputs of the conversation that we had last week are what we're going to talk about this week. In addition to that, we've made reference to the landed cost calculator several different times on this show. What, Jay?
I was gonna point to the screen over there where it's sitting
Oh,
right
okay.
now.
Yeah.
Yes.
We've made reference to the landed cost calculator several times, and so on this show we're going to showcase a little bit about the landed cost calculator, what you can use it for, how you can use it effectively to do some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. So we're going to take a step-by-step approach to breaking down costs and then also considering pricing strategies, and then talk through our landed cost calculator. Um, Jay, any opening thoughts before we get to that?
you know, any given day, it becomes so much more important to know what the tariffs are and what they are an impact to your pricing. And,
Right,
at any given moment, they're there or they're not there. I mean, we don't know. So, what we have to
right.
do is plan and know what the impacts are in case we have to deal with that. And, that's what we're going to do. We're going to arm you with the tools, the knowledge, and all the information you need to make a good, strong, informed decision.
Love it. Love it. Jay, I don't know about you, but I'm still continuing on the non-alcoholic beers. Today we have a Black Butte, which is a really dark one, which is the first of the dark non-alcoholics I've tried. So I'll be sipping on that, and then following up with another different athletic beer, which I enjoy their beer. This is Run Wild, their regular IPA West Coast style, I think. So
Nice.
So I'll be sipping on those along the way. But let's get into it, Jay.
Yeah, most definitely. Let's dive on in.
E-commerce sellers, right? Lots of the time, right? We talk about this as advisors to e-commerce sellers, right? Like an e-commerce seller, a lot of what they're doing is focusing on selling their products and focusing on getting the things out of the door and making sure that they are meeting sales targets and sales goals. That means that you often underestimate because you're not thinking about it, or maybe you don't have the expertise in the area, right? You often underestimate the actual costs involved. That can mean ignoring hidden costs. So we talked about these last week, right? Your shipping, your duties, your tariffs, your storage charges, right? All of those things are very easy to miss when you think about the costs of your product and as you're pricing and selling your products, um, and and that can have a huge impact. A second thing that e-commerce sellers may do that we'd advise against is pricing based on gut feeling instead of data. Like we've always sold it at this price. That's got to be where it is. Or our competitors are at this price. Now, some of that is strategic, but and are data points, right? So if your closest competitor is priced at $29, you don't want to be 37. Um, but you want to use data and information to make sure that you're still being profitable. One other thing that e-commerce sellers may often not think about is accounting for the margin erosion that goes along with platform fees, returns. We talked a little bit about returns just last week as well, and then of course ad spend. And so why does all of that matter? Well, of course, and this is exactly, if you need to hear it, go here to catch last week's episode or whatnot, where we talk a little bit more about it. But why this matters is without knowing your landed cost, you're setting yourself up for cash flow issues and or maybe even worse, unprofitable growth. So again, today we're going to talk about how to help to manage that, and show you a little bit around our tool that helps to do that for you as well, the landed cost calculator. So we're going to break this down into three topic points. The first one is going to be around understanding product sourcing and why we're even talking about this at all, and then we'll get into another couple topics as we go along. So the goal of understanding product sourcing is to help sellers. That's what we're trying to do here, right? Is to help you make informed decisions about where and how to source your products. Jay, when you were in the nutraceutical business, like how did you go around this?
Yeah, that was a great question because I really didn't do a lot of it. My partner was doing a lot of that, and
yeah,
we didn't really pay attention to it. It wasn't until we put in a full-on IMS that we did.
Right.
We were calculating it off the spreadsheets, and we weren't thinking about landing costs.
Right.
So yeah, we were able to account for it when we were making the product, but we weren't thinking of it when we were carrying the product on our inventory and things like that, or the carrying value of inventory. But we knew what the shipping approximately was and had it in the product. I don't believe we had any products with tariffs at the time.
Yeah.
So
did you source anything internationally?
We did, but we did it through American companies, so they gave us a full price.
Oh, okay.
And in some cases, it was a ship price. In some cases, it wasn't. And that's where, depending on what vendor we were buying from, it had the shipping in it and some didn't. So it made a big difference. Now, I can tell you that products you would know as sucralose or Splenda, we would buy that in a 25-pound box.
Yeah.
And that would last for a quarter. And it would
nice.
use so little of it because it was so potent, but it was really, really expensive. And so you treated it as such. But, we knew it came from China because the markings on the box, but we bought it through a U.S.-based vendor. So we didn't deal with it. They had dealt with that, and they stocked a lot of it, so it wasn't they were already bringing it in. So we knew what the price was, and we went with it. So
well, and so to set the table here, right? You have a couple different options when you're sourcing. Yep. Like Jay did, you could source domestically. There's a lot of pros to sourcing domestically, especially right now. One of those is that you get it faster. When it's in Utah or Atlanta, you can get it to your warehouse in the DFW much faster than you can from Shenzhen or somewhere. You also have easier compliance, and so that's a lot of what Jay was just talking about. That those suppliers that he was using that were sourcing international goods had already gone through the compliance testing and making sure that the product was good and could be utilized, right? And so he didn't have to worry as much about that compliance. Now, of course, like Jay mentioned, he was paying full cost. So the offset of the pros of domestic sourcing are the costs. So you end up with a higher cost, and that's a lot to do with labor, and a little bit to do with the distance things travel. So some of the shipping charges and that kind of stuff as well. Your other alternative, of course, to non-domestic. There are two different kinds of international sourcing, or at least when I think about international sourcing, I think about it from two, right? Nearshoring would be like Canada and Mexico, so not really far. So you don't have quite the increase in lead time as you would if you got it from China or Thailand or Vietnam or somewhere across the world. Um, but those countries often offer lower production costs, and particularly those Asian countries. Um, but you do have a trade-off in lead time. So you can't order it and get it in 2 days like Amazon from Shenzhen. It just doesn't work like that. You got to put it on a boat and get it over here, or pay a whole bunch more and put it on a plane and get it over here. And those things either take time or take money. Also, you do have potential quality concerns, and especially if you get product from China that ends up as bad quality, that there's very little that you can do about it once it gets here. You have to work with your vendor to like fix it, but it doesn't help your sourcing need, right? And then of course, one of the cons of international sourcing right now is potential tariffs. When choosing suppliers, you also not you don't have just a domestic versus international or versus nearshoring versus far shoring, whatever it is, right? Like there are other considerations that you need to make as well. One of those, and one of the biggest factors, can be minimum order quantities. Minimum order quantities can have a really, really negative impact on your cash flow because you have to buy, like Jay was talking about, an entire quarter's worth of sucralose in one swoop, because that's just the way that it's sourced. That's the minimum you can get, is 25 pounds. It may last you for a quarter, but you also have to buy a whole quarter's worth up front. And that can be a significant cost, and cash flow burn, right? As you If you think about that more from just a small manufactured product, like if your minimum order quantity takes an entire is to fill an entire trailer, you need to have a full and robust set of products that are going in there. Otherwise, you may end up with 12 months of stock instead of just a quarter's, or even something as wild as maybe 24 months of stock. So it's really important to make sure that you're planning your stock based on your expected needs, and working with your vendors to understand what those minimum order quantities will be and how those impact your ordering and strategic decisions. A second consideration, we talked about it a little bit when we talked about how domestic shipping is fast and international shipping is a little slower, and that's lead times. That's not just lead times for shipping. That's also lead times around like how long it takes to produce the product. If you're one of 5 people who are in the warehouse, they have to retool the warehouse to make your product, and it takes them a week to do that. That's a function of lead time as well. And another thing that you have to consider now, of course, I don't think there's much machining that will take a week to fix, but the idea is the same, right? Like you need to think about how far in advance you need to let the supplier know so that you can get the product in the time that you need it, and that could be the travel time. That could also be production time.
And you want to be tracking all of that in your system so that when you
Right.
are tracking your inventory and trying to predict when you're going to need it, it's going
Right.
to use that lead time when generating purchase orders for you. So it's really important to have that information.
Right. There are a couple other important things to think about as well. The first one is payment terms. If you're on the clock as soon as this is also shipping terms, so payment terms and shipping terms together. There are lots of different shipping terms. And for instance, if you're on the clock, or if you're a destination-based shipping term situation, right? If you're on the clock as soon as as those goods leave China, there's a lot of different things that can potentially do for you, right? The first one is that maybe your payment clock starts right then. The second, and probably more important one, is that if those goods are yours on the boat, then you need to have some kind of insurance coverage around that. And that is a huge consideration that you need to make, because you also need to understand what happens if the boat's going through the Red Sea and gets attacked by a drone, right? There's a lot of very random concerns around that, but also very, very important. What happens if the boat hits a bridge, right? Like what happens? Like these things they sound absurd when you say them, but they've happened in the past 24 months. Both of those things. or you get stuck in the Suez Canal or whatever, right? Like these are all things that can happen, um, and things that are unexpected. And so anytime you're thinking about shipping terms and payment terms, it's really important to understand what those terms mean, and how they impact you, and also impact decisions you should be making, specifically related to insurance, I think.
And those insurance considerations, I mean, you might have that insurance coverage built into your general insurance policy,
Right.
but in a lot of cases, the vendor will also offer that to add that on, and you have to have that as part of the consideration of the price. So it
Right.
might not be part of the product price, but it's part of the general invoice you're going to get from that vendor. So
Yeah.
odds are it's on that invoice, so you'll consider it and you'll know it on your landed cost. But there are hidden parts of that if that is just a component of your general insurance. So you want to know
Yeah.
that and keep that back of mind at all times.
Right. Yeah, and then also payment terms. Like we didn't talk about it so much, but if you have 60 days to pay, that's a lot more favorable than 15, and less favorable than 90. And if you can get the same product for about the same cost, or maybe slightly different cost, but you don't have to pay it as quickly, that can be favorable where you might not think that it, like on its face, is all that good, right? So there, especially in the market and the way that it is right now, where the prime rate's like 8% or something, those 30 days difference can make a big difference, especially if you are ordering a large order quantity. The investing opportunity that you're giving up can be pretty significant. So you really want to think that through. Um, there are some hidden costs. Jay kind of alluded to them already, but there are some other hidden costs of sourcing. The first one of those is we've already talked about a little bit, and we're going to talk about a little bit more, and is all over the news, right? And that's import duties and tariffs. So again, we're not going to talk about that too much right now because we're going to talk about it later. Another one, and especially if you're sourcing products internationally, that's quality control and product testing, because you do want to you're going to want to make sure that the product that you're getting is in good shape, and can be sold in the U.S. based on its ingredients and all of that kind of stuff. And so these are costs that you're going to have to go through. Like you're going to have these costs, especially if you have some kind of chemical in your product. And so it's important to understand and factor those in as well. And then finally, we talked a little bit about this last week. But warehousing, fulfillment costs, those are really important as well. And especially when you consider them in conjunction with lead times and minimum order quantities and kind of the levels of stock that you may need to keep on hand, reorder points and all of that kind of stuff, because you're going to want to understand what those what those costs are, and what that may mean to you and your company. Jay, when you think about understanding product sourcing in that way, right? Are there any other hidden costs that you think about when you're thinking about this, or other things that you think are important to talk about today?
You talked about the quality control and the testing, and
Yeah.
as what I came from was basically a food manufacturing plant. We were making nutritional supplements. Every product that came in had to be lab tested to make sure
Right.
it was basically the efficacy the claims were. It had
Right.
X percentage of protein. It had this, that, and these vitamins, minerals, all that stuff. So
Right.
there were a lot of extra costs there, and we just had a line item: lab testing. We didn't include that over there. We weren't thinking about that back then. But
Right.
that is part of your landed cost, because that is a cost of bringing that product in and making it available for sale. And
That's
it
right.
is so important because those costs can generally add up quick. So that's a great point that you pointed that out. I really like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that's our conversation then about sourcing. The second thing that we'll talk about is again we'll call it the key to profitability. And we talked about it ongoing last week, and we make reference to it and allude to it kind of all of the time. And Jay has developed a whole cost calculator related to it, and that's calculating your landed costs. The purpose of this portion of our show today is to help sellers understand that pricing a product starts with knowing what the real cost is to get that into inventory and ready to sell. And so there are lots of different things here. So Jay, take it away.
Yeah. So, this is very pertinent times for calculating your landed cost because of the possibility of added tariffs. But even if you aren't subject to tariffs, this is a great tool to be using to making sure you're pricing your product correctly. And I have an example in here right now of a widget. And basically, we'll just quickly run through the fields here and the information that's in there. This is on a product that I was working with a client some time back. And name is a widget. There's your SKU number. So you can keep this if you want to. This is set up that we created an output page and you can download the PDF so you can keep that in your records or whatever you might want. But so we have the product cost from the vendor, 25 cents a pound. We have shipping and freight. I'm leaving that off for now. We have tariffs. I'm leaving that off. Insurance and handling, leaving that off. There might be other import costs or other shipping costs you have to weigh there. And then the purchasing quantity was approximately 100,000 pounds at a time. And this company was just trying to cover their handling cost. They wanted a 10% margin on it because they were working within a network and helping other companies with it. So basically they were selling it at a 10% markup. So they were buying it at 25 cents. They were selling it at 27.5. So when we hit calculate, and here is the magic, we can see that there was no impact to that price because...
Can you move it a little
Oh,
in?
yeah, I got to move it over. I forgot about that. There we go. Yeah. Let's make that a little larger there too. And unfortunately, every time I open it, it's going to do that. So, so basically, they were breaking even on the product. They were making the 10%. They weren't breaking even. But when I started looking at this and we're building out the IMS for them, I noticed that they were paying. I mean, this was 100,000 pounds of product. It was about 10 pallets, so it was half a truckload. So it was about $2,500 that they were paying in shipping cost. So when you calculate that now and bring that over, and you look at that, so there's your total cost was $27.5 for that product. Now you can see the recommended cost at 10% is 30 cents a pound, yet they were selling it for 27.5. And the landed cost was 28. So
no.
Now not only are they losing the margin, they're also losing profit.
Right.
So, well, they're not losing profit, they're losing. So that is the key to understanding your landed cost. So let's just assume this product was coming from Mexico and is now subject to a 25% tariff. So what we will do is put 25% there in the tariff column. We'll recalculate that and we will drag this on over. When we look at that, the tariff is another $6,500. And now when we look at the landed cost, it's 34 cents a pound. And if you only want a 10% markup, you need to be selling it at 37 cents a pound. They're selling it at a loss of 9.7 cents a pound. And there it is, 9,625. So they're still losing money on this product by doing that. And you can see they have a negative 22% margin. So, if you were going to do that and you want to know what to price it at, you would know that you want to price it at the recommended selling price of 37 cents. And that is going to get you in that area of getting that where you need it to be. Now, the flexibility here is, let's say you wanted to make sure you had a profit margin. Yeah, we don't need all that information there. We want a profit margin of 50%. We calculate that, and now we got to price that at 51 cents to make a 50% profit on 50% gross profit on it. So
Right.
that's going to tell us exactly how much it is. Now let's change that up a little bit. Let's change this. Let's say it's a toy that we're paying $9.95 for, and let's leave the shipping the same. The tariff. Let's take the tariff out, and let's say we're doing 10,000 units. We want a 50% margin, and we're selling this at $12.95. So it's not quite a 50% margin, but that's what we're currently selling it at. So at this point, it needs to be at least $15.30 to make the margin that you're looking for.
Yeah, it's
That's
a big change.
again without a tariff, and because of the pricing, you're losing out on almost $24,000 on this 10,000 unit order. So if you're looking at that, that's the opportunity cost of not adjusting your prices timely and keeping an eye on that. Now, let's just assume these are coming from China and it's got a 20% tariff on it. We'll go ahead and calculate that. And I don't know what happened to my camera. But
We can still hear you at least.
Yeah, I'm not what's important here. So let's pull this up here. So now your tariff is $20,000 on that product. And based on the pricing, just by adding in the tariff, if you didn't adjust your price, you're now up to a $53,000 opportunity cost because you haven't adjusted the price. So it is so important you stay on top of this and make sure that you are tracking that at every moment so that you have the right cost, because that is lost profit, but it could be just a loss, and that's not what you want. And I'm looking right at the camera saying this, and the camera's not even looking at me here. So with that said, that is why it's so important to track your landed cost. And so as we're going through that, you see the components that are on here, and I think it's really important. I added this financial impact in here because I want you to see what the cost is of not changing your price or having your price too low. And the other part here is you can click the download button and go ahead and save that, like I said. So, that's another great feature of having that. So it's a simple, easy to use tool. I highly recommend checking it out. We'll link it in the video, and so definitely want you to check that out.
Right. Yeah, and so Jace talked about like how missing just just any of these costs can have a huge impact. And when I think about $53,000, that's like an entire like person potentially on your team that you could afford just from making a pricing change. Now, maybe not the whole person, right? But a part-time person potentially that can help assist maybe in doing all kinds of different things for your company. So that's a huge impact.
And that's just one item.
Yeah, just from one item.
Right.
And so I do think that really drives home how important it is to truly capture and be thoughtful of all of the different costs that you're incurring. And the landed cost calculator can be a really effective tool to help you do that. Jay, before we move on to setting the right price, do you have anything else that you want to talk about as it comes to calculating landed cost or the landed cost calculator today?
Mostly I just want to say that this is going to be available for you free. All we're going to ask for is you submit your email address, and we'll get it to you, and it's going to be on our website. So once you get access to it, you have access to it and use it, and I highly recommend you use it. Now, this could also be something that if you need, we could build it into some of your workflows that you're doing, so that we could actually build this just for you. So if you're using tools or purchase orders or something, and you want to know, we could actually work off that and build out a flow for you. So that's some of the important stuff here. But I think it's important that that you're not alone. there are e-commerce experts like Chris and I that can help guide you through this process. I've done it. I've talked about my nutraceutical business. I've done it there. I've done it with clients, and as we're doing it every time, we're learning more and more each time as well. Because
That's right.
every company operates a little different. They work with different vendors who have different policies, and it just helps expand our knowledge of this. So lean on us to help expand your knowledge as well. And if you have dealt with this in the past, drop comments down there. We want to know how you've dealt with it as well, and what you're using to do that. And are you using an inventory management system to calculate your landed cost, so you're tracking it in your inventory balances with your COGS, your cost of goods sold on every sale. So it's just so important. And I think I said it here way back when we started out, we were on a couple of databases and some desktop QuickBooks, and we did not have the infrastructure to track it. And once a quarter, we'd shut down for a day. We'd pull every product off the shelf and weigh it that way, because everything we bought was in bulk. So we had a box. We threw the box on the scale. We knew what the box weighed, and from there we took the quantity times the price that we were carrying it at, and there was our inventory. Well, today it's so much easier than that, and we implemented that system a few years after that, but we still ran that for like 3 or 4 years. It's unbelievable that we did that, and it still worked. It's just a different way of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so again, calculating and evaluating your landed costs is critical. Jay talked you through it right there, of how even just missing a couple costs in your pricing can move you from where you think you're profitable to where you're truly actually just selling your product at a loss, which will obviously kill your profitability.
And volume doesn't make up for it.
No, not in that situation. It does not.
No.
Nope.
It
No,
just
it
gets
doesn't.
you to a greater loss faster.
That's right. That's right. Just burns even more of your cash.
Yep.
So again, that leads into our final topic point here, and that's pricing for profit. So setting the right price. The goal is to help you to achieve that target gross profit margin while also staying competitive. And so there are a couple metrics that we think are really important in this situation, right? The first one of those is cost of goods sold. So that is what are your landed costs, right? What are the things that go into the calculation of inventory valuation? There's also a misconception sometimes between your markup. So like Jay talked about originally, right? If you take just the product cost and you mark that up by a certain percentage, that's not going to be your margin. And the reason that it won't be your margin is because you have these other costs that are associated as well. And those are things that need to be factored in when you're pricing your products. Some other business costs that can be really important in considering both pricing and profitability is your accounting for ad spend. So what is your return on that ad spend, and how much does it take to acquire a customer? So your CAC, your customer acquisition costs. So those two things typically go hand in hand, right? A lot of that ad spend is with the intention of acquiring a new customer. But those types of things can be factors that really impact your profitability overall. And then we made mention of it before. That's also other costs that can be really important are also your platform fees. So every transaction that runs through Shopify costs you about, 2.9 and some change or something. So that is a pretty typical fee for a merchant processor, but it also allows make sure that you get your money timely and you don't have to get it all hung up and everything else. And then you also have to think about like with Amazon, right? Amazon has a lot of different fees that are included in their fee, and so those fulfillment shipping charges are also really important metrics to consider as you're building out the pricing of your product. So there are a couple different a couple different pricing strategies that you could utilize. The first, maybe the easiest of those, is cost plus pricing. So you start with that landed cost, and then you do just mark it up. You say I want exactly a 25% margin on my landed costs. Jay, I think that's how your the landed cost calculator is built, right? It says cost plus.
Yeah, based on that. But I mean, we're going to get into it here in a moment, but you
Yeah.
still have to have some competitive strategy to determine what that profit percentage should be.
Right.
And, in some cases, you have competitors, you know what their product cost is, so you have to match that. Or
Right.
you do some A/B testing, this product in this market, we're going to sell it at a 40% markup. On this one, we're going to do it at a 60% markup and see if it works. And, so there's a lot to it, more than just calculating it, but
Yeah.
the key is having that number and using your actual research to figure out what that profit should be.
Right. Yeah, and so doing competitive pricing, right, where you're analyzing your competitors' prices, that can be and almost certainly would be very effective, right? If you know that people when they Google your type of product, if they land on you or your closest competitor and you're 10% higher, that may be a problem, and that may be a thing that you need to consider, right? So that is a data point that can allow you to have this have an effective pricing strategy.
Or you
Also,
have
if
to
you do
have
it
a way to actually combat that price difference. Hey,
right,
this is
right,
made in America product
yeah,
versus an
or
imported product or something
or a
like that.
higher quality or
Right.
whatever it is.
Exactly.
And that all comes down to brand positioning and all of the things that go along with that. And so that's a strategic decision that you definitely will have to make if you want to. I mean, you need to be thinking about it anyway. But if you want to just use competitive pricing as a place here, right? If you want to just be whatever 5% cheaper than your closest competitor because you're basically selling something similar, like, and you want that volume, like that's an option. Or if you want to just be directly comparable to them,
Right.
that's an option as well. And those are things that you definitely should be thinking about, is especially if you want to use competitive pricing. Um, and then the last one, the one that gets all the talking points in the accounting landscape, or advisory practice landscape, is value-based pricing. So that's not charging based necessarily on the underlying metrics. It's not a cost plus item. It's a perceived value of how much is this product worth, not how much does this product cost. And so that's definitely a strategy that you could attempt to employ as well. Oftentimes, it's really important in such a situation that you evaluate what those costs are, because you want to be thoughtful of if the value in the market is lower than lower than it needs to be. Either A, that's not a product you need to sell, or B, you need to price it a little higher.
I find that's a little more difficult to do
Yeah,
in
with
in
tangible
products.
goods.
Yeah, with
Yeah,
tangible
sure,
goods. Because
absolutely.
you and I would look at the same can of beer and you would value it much higher than I would because I don't prefer beer.
Fair.
So, just things like that. So, when you're doing a commodity type product, it's a little more
Uh-huh.
difficult.
Yeah. Um, and it is a consideration of um, not just the value in the market, but also who your consumers are. For exactly like you're talking about there, Jay. Like, who do you want to target? Who are you intending to buy your product?
Hmm.
Um, and that product market fit is a really critical thing to think about, especially if you're going to try to price for value.
Yeah.
Which like Jay said, in most of the tangible retail space, that's going to be really hard to do. Um, Though it is significantly more popular in service based entities, because it's really hard to put a this price costs this, because there's no bomb, right? You're not getting an ounce of this and an ounce of that and an ounce of the other, right? You're just getting some portion of someone's time, which is which is a different way to evaluate something for sure. Each of these different pricing strategies can have a significant impact on on your margin. I don't think we really need to go deep into why that would be, but if you're going cost plus, right, you're going to have a pretty good idea of what your margin is. If you're using a competitive based pricing like that, that can shrink your margins, especially if your competitors are already a little lower in price than what you'd want them to be. And then of course value-based pricing has margins that could end all over the place. So each of these different pricing strategies are an option, but they're all going to have different effects and impacts on your margins overall, and then also on your demand, which is an important factor that we didn't really talk about here. Jay, any other thoughts as it comes to pricing strategies?
I think the biggest thing with pricing, it comes down to gut. It's
Yeah.
having, what is that feeling inside you about that price? And, you set a product, you set it for sale, and it sells out immediately. Well, you priced it too low. It's like, okay, we should have bumped that up a little bit. How much
Right.
is a little bit? How
Sure.
much is too much? And
Right.
at that point, it's like, okay, sales are continuing. It's okay. So, it's that fine line, and it's the
Yeah.
same thing in our business.
Right.
It's like, oh, I should have priced that a little bit differently, but yeah,
Well, and the good news is that in a lot of cases, right, you're not fixed to the price that you choose.
right,
But
exactly.
the most important factor, most important thing that we want to highlight for you, right? The reason that we've built this landed cost calculator is that the most important thing that you do with your pricing is that you want to make sure that you're pricing in a profitable way. You don't want to price at a point that felt right, but is actually less than the product's costing you directly, because that's a underwater situation you're never going to be able to swim out of, like Jay was talking about
Yep.
before. And so it becomes extremely important to make sure that if you're pricing by feel, that you're taking into consideration these data points related to cost, so that you can ensure that your business is bringing back enough funds for you. So with all of that considered, right? If you don't know your true landed cost, you could potentially be selling at a loss. Your pricing should be data driven in some way, right? So what Jay's talking about when you're pricing by feel and you're selling more than you thought you might, right? That's not it's while it's feel, it's also based on data, right? You have some sales points.
Yeah.
You can see pretty quickly, okay, maybe I should have priced that a little bit higher, and maybe I need to move that price up, right? Most importantly, like making those data driven decisions is way more important than just guessing. Guesswork's not going to get you to the right answers.
Right.
And then of course, Jay has built a tool that can help you at least find a starting place for this, right? If you want those 50% margins, and you put all of the key inputs into the pricing calculator, and then you're 25% higher than your competitor who's offering a similar product, well, then maybe 50% margin's not actually achievable,
Right.
and you need to make a consideration around whether you'd be comfortable with 30% or 35 or something like this.
Well,
Uh,
and if you're using the calculator to do that cost comparison, you know
yeah,
what you want to achieve. Let's say you want to achieve a 40% margin,
yeah,
and you're using the example we had earlier, that 40% margin with a product with a 20% tariff was 17.20. That
yeah,
was your recommended cost at 40% markup. But your competitor is selling it at 15.95. So, okay, do you take that little hit? It'll calculate how much your opportunity cost is that you're losing out on there by selling it at the lower
yeah,
cost. Now, things to keep in mind. Let's say that competitor happens to be Amazon themselves.
yeah.
They are probably buying a much larger quantity than you are, so they can afford to sell it at
Cut
a
price.
lower price. So that's something that you can actually negotiate with your vendor. Hey, I know we've been buying these at 10,000 at a time, but I want to buy 50 at a time. But I only want you to ship them 12,500 at a time,
Yeah.
and bill me when you ship them. So they will work with you and give you the higher quantity because it's reducing their manufacturing costs to do the higher quantity. But I mean, there are some warehousing costs, and they will bake all that in. You will get
Yeah.
the lower price by doing that, and you will then be able to probably compete with your competitor at that lower price and still
That's right.
maintain margin. So that's where all this comes in play, and having the data and why it's so important to do these exercises.
Yeah, and I think that's a good full circle synopsis too, right, Jay?
Yeah,
Like everything starts with sourcing. It starts with evaluating lead times and payment terms and volume considerations, minimum order quantities, all of that stuff. You have to make sure that you're considering your landed costs, and you need to use all of that information in order to build a price point that is profitable for you and your business. And then, of course,
a
we've built the landed cost.
sustainable price point. That's
That
the
is
key.
true. That is really, really important.
Yes.
And then of course, like we've talked about several times and we've mentioned for weeks now, Jay's built the landed cost calculator to help you price with confidence, right? To give you satisfaction in the knowledge that you need to be able to pick a price that makes at least reasonable sense. You're probably not going to price at $17.20, but maybe it tells you $16.99 is okay.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot that you can do with the landed cost calculator. So please go out there, go fill it out, give it a try, see how your pricing compares right now. See if it compares to your current margins and whether or not you're leaving some on the table.
Exactly.
And then right there in the landed costed calculator, I don't know if Jay mentioned it as he was going through. There is a need help button, and so if you're struggling with that landed cost calculator, or if you just want to reach out to get some help with product sourcing or pricing strategy or financial analysis, hit that need help button, and we'll be there on the other side. Jay, any final thoughts from you today?
This is important stuff, and it's really super important you do this now. I mean, prices, we've seen the prices rise over the last 2 years. We're probably at the highest levels now where we are currently today. And if you haven't been keeping up on it, you need to be doing this yesterday, making sure that your pricing structure's properly set and you haven't been eating all of these price increases. So take care of that now, look at it, and then be prepared for any possible tariffs that might be coming. And I would actually have those conversations with your vendors right now, because you might not know where the products are being sourced from. So have those conversations, know the origin of the products that are coming in, and know your costs and anticipate these changes. And be prepared.
And as those things change over time, Jay and I will be right here to tell you all about it. Right here. So check back in next Friday at 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern for the next episode of the e-commerce hour from On the Rocks. Jay, any final weekend plans or anything exciting going on in the world more broadly this weekend? It's tax deadline. Are you like doing a celebration? You making it's Pie Day today too?
It's Pie Day, yeah. I actually made pizza dough 2 days ago for today, but my daughter is home for spring break. She got home, handed me my water cup because I forgot it, and she's hadn't been feeling too well, so we'll probably do pizza tomorrow or Sunday. But it's gonna. I have one tax return left to deliver, and I'm actually going to celebrate St. Patty's Day on Monday on the golf course. So,
there you go.
Yeah. So if you need some help with your landed cost calculator, put in that request on Monday. Chris will be there, but I'm always there.
Jay, I'll catch you on Tuesday.
So, yeah.
Fantastic. The weather's supposed to be lovely here in the DFW area, assuming that the wind today doesn't blow everything over. Supposed to be gusts up to 50 right now.
Ooh, wow.
So I haven't heard them or seen them, but I believe it. But then it's supposed to be pretty pleasant all weekend, so I'm sure we'll get the little one out to the park, try to enjoy a little sunshine, and take advantage of the spring before my wife's allergies get too bad. Um, or even worse, I guess is maybe the right thing to say. The pollen's out there.
It's
Things are
so
starting to
bad.
turn green.
Yes, for
So
sure.
maybe a little yard work too. Got to trim back some bushes, that kind of thing. So you can imagine that'll be in my future as well.
There you go.
But what I do know is that I'll be back here again next Friday, and I want to thank everybody for spending time with us today, listening to us talk about landed costs some more, because it is so important. That's why we continue to harp on it. That you cannot run your business effectively if you're not managing these costs appropriately,
That's it.
and that's it's something that Jay and I are both passionate about, and that's why we're here talking to you today.
Yeah.
So have a great weekend, everybody. Look out for those tariffs. Make sure to use the landed cost calculator, and we'll see you in the next one.
Have a great weekend, everybody. We're out of here.